Good afternoon, good morning, depending on when you are. We're here today, December 2021. That's the occasion of the 49th Dialogues. Madam Efthymiou, thank you very much for being with us this evening, and we do hope and trust that you'll help all of us close a very strange year, perhaps with a better understanding of it, I would dare say. Welcome. Thank you very much again for being here with us. In order to start our discussion, Maria Efthymiou, Professor of History and Archaeology at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. History Will Show is the title for the month of December and the Dialogues of December 2021, and I don't suppose I need to explain why we chose this title. Because of what we've been experiencing, and perhaps because of the answers we're looking for, perhaps we should wonder about the ways that would lead us to the answers that we need. And of course, it cannot be another way other than know where we come from, know what happened prior to our occasion today, and what we are called upon to face. However, reality shows, and I include myself in the great number of people that do not have a good understanding of history. Our knowledge is suboptimal, I would say, and there's the sociological approach to history, I would say. Not only memory of numbers, of dates, of years, and so on and so forth. We shall discuss all these analytically, and all of you are welcome to take part in our discussion. You know very well that throughout our 49th Dialogues, what we've been doing is discuss, all of us together, with the guests that specialize in all the topics that we discuss every time. At the same time, we want you all to be active, whether you're attending, being physically present, or whether you're attending remotely. Please ask questions and make comments within the framework of this open dialogue that we've been hosting for 4 years on initiative of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation with the partnership of the journalistic group of the non-for-profit organization IMED. The concern we've been experiencing is a given, not only lately, but it has culminated. Fear is, of course, a very known emotion for all of us. However, polarization and questioning and doubts, whether we are talking about doubting the political system or the mass media, of course, this is something that we've seen happen quite early, already back at the time of the socio-economic crisis and the refugee crisis that our country was called upon to cope with along with the entirety of Europe. And we have the questioning of science, experts, and questioning and doubts in interpersonal relations, and the management of what has been happening around us in the dialogue we've been having with our fellow citizens, our colleagues, and of course throughout society. Of course, it goes without saying that no discussion of ours is limited to Greece alone. This, especially this topic, is related to something that touches the entire world and societies all over the world. And of course, these features may have common roots, but also have particularities depending on where they manifest themselves. It is not necessary for me, Madam Efthymiou, to say that the response we had on announcement of the topic was indeed great, and especially when people found out that you'd be participating. You know that, of course, but I ought to convey the message that people have responded enthusiastically. Before we even commenced our conversation today, many days ago, we received a number of questions, and the comments that we received in our channel and the mass media have been numerous and interesting. And of course, we members of our team have been recipients of messages of enthusiasm from the people that are looking forward to hearing you speak, and people who know you personally, or people who know you through the way in which you teach history generously, giving people what you know, your knowledge. Thank you ever so much. Thank you very much. The first question that you broached is valid by all means. That is a question of whether we feel fear and dread faced with what's been happening lately. I would say, no, this is not the first occasion. People are always concerned. There's no way that you can get out of it. We are small creatures faced with powers far superior than we are. Nature among them. This has been the truth for millions of years of our existence. We know that we are finite, that we die, and all these create a being that is full of different features of courage and of stress and concerns. So it's only natural. However, the societies that where we're living are far safer than they used to be, you should know, even on a global level. What we've been experiencing for the past 70 years is impressive, with a great reduction of wars. Not that wars disappeared, far from it, but wars were considerably reduced. And we've had the creation of ever more states that have a kind of social system in place. In fact, all of us living in Europe live in a continent that had produced a lot of pain and a lot of violence in the 20th century, because both world wars started from Europe and the theatre of war was Europe itself. However, at the same time, this continent had produced the most advanced ideological systems regarding the operation and function of societies, the ones which have prevailed in the past 200 years. And this Western civilization has engendered an unprecedented financial, scientific progress, especially in the past 200 years. After the Second World War, through particular and peculiar balances that ceased to exist in 1989, humanity saw some solutions that emanated from the polarization that existed in the past. And these solutions regard a welfare state to a better, to a higher, or to a lower extent in different places, but far more extensive compared any time in history. Never before had so many millions of people have something to expect from public institutions, expect such a management, such a wide management of a humanitarian problem like that of the pandemic we've experienced. And my opinion is that what we live all around us, in fact, shows that there has been victory of mankind. The vaccine was invested with an impressive combination of hundreds of research centers and competitive pharmaceutical manufacturers who agreed that up to a certain extent in the research pipeline, they will exchange information in order to expedite the discovery of the vaccine. This is also a victory of modern society, in my opinion. Therefore, if we are concerned or overly concerned, of course we are, nothing is perfect, but we need to compare things to other occasions, previous occasions. Never before has a pandemic been met with such a wide coverage. So many millions of people were able to work from home, and all these people were paid monthly by the state, as if they were working, as it happened in our society, as if they really went to work, because many people could not, of course, work, and they were at home, and the state, our state, and many other states provided these people with a monthly sum so that they could make ends meet. This could not be expected in the past. Therefore, we can put all these positive things in the basket of positivity of our thoughts. Of course, we are concerned, on the other hand, because humanity is going through a transition period. Transition period. I repeat, look, we had some safeguards. Humanity had gone through different periods of safety, and as it happens with all earthly matters, all these periods of safety are finite, and something will always subvert things and bring you to a new course as humankind. After 1989 and the end of the Cold War, the definite prevalence of the United States of America and the Western system globally, it appeared for a certain period of time that there was something that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had its own coordinates and it guided humanity, more in some places, less in some other places. However, the rise of China, which has been impressive in the past 20 years, the first indications of reduction of power of the United States, the rise of other parallel powers like India, Turkey, the new position of Russia definitely lead to new balances. And, of course, there can be changes engendered, and we all know that, and changes are here already. You have no way of knowing what the changes will be, and this is something that creates stress and fear. They may be conducive and beneficial and positive, or the opposite, because when balance is lost and waiting to find a new balance, the lapse, the period of time, this period of vagueness can be larded with fear and violence and fear. I belong to the generation that never experienced a war. I was born in 1955. I'm 66 years old, and I've never been through a war. And I have to tell you that in the past 70 years, many peoples on Earth did not experience war. Some other ones were not equally as lucky, but for all intents and purposes, we have more people that have lived without war, and this in its own right makes things very particular, because we have come to regard peace as a foregone conclusion. And if something happens and we see tension and we see violence, we'll be psychologically and emotionally speaking, will be far less ready compared to the generation of my parents and grandparents, because theirs were generations that lived with war. We'll keep what you pointed out, because I understand the optimism and the strength that the knowledge of history can infuse in us, and at the same time, the great caution that we need in this period of transition, precisely because this period comprises many different intense emotions, which on an individual level can be experienced by any of us, I suppose. At the same time, we need to see how all of these are reflected in the wider society. We went out and we asked people, Madam Efthymiou, their opinion about this period of ours and how it is that they like it, what do they think of it, and what are the prevalent features in our society. Let's hear the answers that people gave us, and we'll come back immediately.
Πώς βιώνετε αυτή την περίοδο που διανύουμε με όλα αυτά τα οποία συμβαίνουν?
Αυτή
η περίοδος νομίζω είναι δύσκολη για όλους. Δύσκολη για όλους. Υπάρχει ένας, πέρα από την πανδημία και το ήδη κακό που συμβαίνει στην ανθρωπότητα, είναι και αυτός ο διαχωρισμός, ας πούμε, των ανθρώπων.
Είναι κάπως ψυχοπλακωτικό να βλέπεις πως όλος ο κόσμος είναι διχασμένος ανάμεσα στο αν πρέπει να κάνει το εμβόλιο ή όχι και να δημιουργείται αυτός ο διχασμός.
Πρέπει να εμβολιαστούμε. Και όχι μόνο για μας, περισσότερο για τα παιδιά μας. Τι μέλλον, τι τους αφήνουμε, σε ποιο μέλλον θα περπατήσουν, πού θα βαδίσουν.
Αν υπάρχει κάτι που πρέπει να πιστεύεις εκεί έξω, είναι η επιστήμη. Απλά το θέμα είναι ότι η επιστήμη φιλτράρεται από όλο αυτό το παιχνίδι των πολιτικών και αυτά και φτάνει στα αυτιά μας λίγο... Δηλαδή, εμπιστοσύνη 100% δεν μπορείς να έχεις σίγουρα. Αλλά δεν πρέπει να διαχωριζόμαστε ο λαός. Πρέπει να μένουμε μαζί.
Όλα αυτά όμως δεν ξέρω. Μπορεί να μας κάνουν και καλύτερους, μπορεί να μας κάνουν και χειρότερους. Θα είμαστε επιθετικοί, θα γίνουμε ακόμη πιο επιθετικοί, θα κλέβουμε, θα κάνουμε. Δηλαδή, θα φύγει αυτή η ανθρωπιά από πάνω μας.
Κοιτάξτε, η πόλωση που έχει δημιουργηθεί είναι ένα αρνητικό φαινόμενο και δεν προέρχεται από τους κατοίκους της χώρας αυτής. Η πόλωση αυτή δημιουργήθηκε, κατά τη γνώμη μου, πάλι από τους κυβερνώντες, να το πούμε, αυτοί οι οποίοι παίρνουν αυτά τα μέτρα.
Ο απλός λαός πάντα έτσι τα βιώνει αυτά. Προσπαθούμε. Δίνουμε όλοι αγώνα, δεν μπορείς να κάνεις κάτι άλλο.
Τι σκέφτεστε για την πόλωση που επικρατεί γύρω μας και αυτό πώς σας επηρεάζει?
Υπάρχει και μάλιστα είναι πάρα πολύ έντονη και κάποια στιγμή θα πρέπει λίγο να ηρεμήσουμε, να χαλαρώσουμε και να δούμε ποια είναι η πραγματικότητα σε όλο αυτό που ζούμε και να το πάρουμε λίγο αλλιώς. Ενωμένοι, νομίζω ότι έχουμε δύναμη και μπορούμε όλα να τα αντιμετωπίσουμε καλύτερα. Ενώ τώρα έτσι δυσκολεύει ακόμη περισσότερο η κατάσταση.
How did all that sound to you, Mrs. Efthymiou? Well, I suppose the answers could be expected. This is something that exists all around you, and it goes without saying that I heard most people talk about polarization, dividing those that refuse to be vaccinated. Of course, this is not a Greek phenomenon, it is international. It is a phenomenon which, in fact, comes in the course of something. Look, in human societies, there are always groups that question and doubt. And one can say that this thread of questioning, to begin with, has something healthy to it. It is a good thing to be alert and to have our antennas vigilant. However, it also has a little bit of morbidity in it, and to a great extent, this polarization we see around us has inherent negative features. In Greece, we have a tradition of polarization. It appears that we supersede all other nations in what concerns polarization, I can say. Therefore, there's no surprise there. Not even the percentage. There's 30%, if I'm not mistaken. There's percentage of people that refuses to undergo vaccination every year. What is precisely the same percentage of people which in previous periods of times thought that we are being sprayed from above with some strange substances. Ours is a nation that has a history of 200 years of polarization. This is sort of normalcy for us, and if we're not polarized, I suppose, we don't feel quite comfortable. It appears that only in such an environment we feel that things are normal. And this is sad. This is sad because it has done immense damage to us. Now we have merely found a new pretext. You can't write it off because it goes without saying that these people exist. They say what they say, they have in mind what they have in mind, and I suppose you can only respect the fact that they have a different opinion. You just try to analyze it and make something out of it. Who are you to impose your thoughts upon other people? They've heard everything. It's not that they lack information. On Greek television, we hear analysis and we hear analytical comments made by top experts every day. So we don't lack information, far from it. So people who refuse to understand certain things are not ignorant, they are not uninformed. They have made their minds, in my opinion, very poorly. But anyway, they have made their minds in a certain way. Excuse me for interrupting. I am following what you're saying with great attention because especially we Greek people know very well that discord is a feature of our history. Πες του να σταματήσει. Greece entered this pandemic after 10 years of recession. Then we had the refugee crisis, which is still here. It has not stopped. And we see that every time, with every pretext, there is polarization. However, here we see that this questioning is very intense. Let's not talk about it because, indeed, this is a matter. The lack of trust and therefore the fact that we question institutions, science, and the interim link, which is that of the media. These are three different fields of discussion. My question is the following. Through our history and our intense past in polarization and the intense division of people to an extent that does not allow us to enter into dialogue, that does not allow us to coexist. And I'm only asking for your impression because no one can tell for sure. Is this a moment of culmination, a moment of climax, which is unprecedented? Is it something that will overcome drawing on our past? What is your opinion? Look, Greek society went through an inconceivable polarization because of the civil war, and it lasted for about 70 years, and there is nothing we can compare to that, in fact. We've been through mountains, Himalayan mountains of polarization, of bitterness, of resentment, of violence. So if we compare the present situation to what we went through in the past, it is nothing, in fact. It is something that verges on the ridiculous. Of course, it's here, but there's no comparison. In my opinion, the Greek society is making a transition which is positive. In my opinion, in the past 10 years, many of us some of us who were more frivolous and more ready to say things easily without thinking, people that found it easy to be poignant and poisonous and morbid, ever discovering new conspiracies and collusions that only aim at evil for our society. So this suit that we've been wearing for such a long time is shrinking, in my opinion. So we see that there is an increase in the number of people who are not fond of this kind of person. We don't like this kind of person. We want to be better. We want to be more serious. We want to be calmer. We want to be more rational. And this is something that we've seen. We've seen in the recession to an extent, and we've also seen that in the pandemic. Greeks handled the pandemic with quite a lot of discipline. They were quite serious. We need to say that. Let us not underestimate the attitude. The majority of our people were disciplined. They understood the criticality of the whole situation and generally followed that which, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the majority of this country, was the right thing to do. Of course, not in the opinion of everyone, but in my opinion and the opinion of the majority. Let's not make light of it. And let's not accentuate what happens with this smaller percentage of people. They undergo their fluctuations as well. Don't they overshadow the rest? No, they shouldn't, because in this way we don't do justice to the millions of people that acted according to reason and what logic demands, in my opinion. Of course, other ones have a different opinion and they are free to have it.
This whole debate about us becoming vaccinated or not is, I believe, deeply political in the sense that one of the most critical political debates is this, meaning how and if possible, how can this be allowed, whether we could allow a minority to eventually put the majority at risk if the majority so happens to believe. This is a critical political debate, one of the most interesting ones, perhaps. Well, at that, may I say one thing? The quality of the information we are having, and if I may say so, the absolute figures as well as the actual ones, I believe might be in a position to make us understand. Of course, we may not become scientists overnight, so as to have a qualified opinion as to what to do. Perhaps we should be embarking on the questions that keep coming to us over the network. We can see them on the screen. There was a question that was put forward a moment ago. What do you believe the historians of tomorrow will be saying about the current pandemic? I have read some of your interviews, and you have been referring to these aspects, and you also compared this to other pandemics that humankind has experienced. So what could possibly the future historians say about the current pandemic? Let me tell you this, more pandemics of the kind will be experienced, and perhaps the historians of tomorrow will not be separated from the reality. Today's pandemic is very special in that it is truly universal and is being spreading very swiftly. That I grant you, we are all experiencing a very speedy time, and what with the multitude of contacts all around us, a flight was enough to bring the virus from China all the way to Italy, and from that point on, you know what happened. It is most likely that in the future, more things of the kind will be happening. Don't forget that in the past, it was much more difficult to move around and travel. It was by car, on horseback. Now things are much more swift. Never had the planet been populated by 7 billion and more people moving about all the time. This is a densely populated planet, so the transmission is very quick. Nevertheless, I have to say that the health services reacted in a very quick way. So did governments, given the circumstances, and thanks to the possibilities of modern technology. I therefore believe that the way this pandemic has been handled and is being handled will be thoroughly studied and analyzed, as the case is with any other pandemic. Right now, it is the universality that really sets the tone of studies, and I believe that both now and tomorrow, this pandemic will be discussed as such, a universal phenomenon. Maybe it's a one step forward to true globalization. Inevitably, sooner or later, in some centuries from now, the Earth will be a global village, and these are steps that, if anything, may I remind you, teach us that we are members of a universal community, a community that is being shaped, that is being in full gestation. In the meantime, as I've been following you, I see the following question. You see how different expressions. History will show, history will tell, history is being repeated. Well, history repeats itself unless we take aboard the fundamental aspects of each period. Is this a new world we're living in, or perhaps we keep living the same things because we do not teach ourselves from what is happening? Could the modern human being aspire at a better tomorrow based on today's facts? Yes, we should be very optimistic. History is in full evolution. It is an evolutive process. Nothing is stagnant, nothing is stable. There has been a time when developments were slow to happen, but there was never a staticity of sorts. There was no stagnation. Things have been evolving, and what with a change of thought and the evolution of the citizen, of the community, of course, things have been changing. The human being is a social being from the moment the conscience of existence was shaped some million years ago, heaven knows when that was. What we have been experiencing nowadays is shapes and dimensions never experienced before. The explosion of knowledge. Let us remember that today the flow of knowledge goes at a speed twice as high as what it used to be. And building on the knowledge that has been accumulated over the centuries, it is something tremendous, truly. We have to truly acknowledge that. And, as of the last 20 or so years, maybe 30 years to be more precise, it is UNESCO's data I'm quoting, the absolute poverty in the human societies was reduced by 60% or so, and that because various countries which up to that point had large portions of population living in poverty embarked on a tremendous pace of development and growth, and hundreds of thousands of people shifted from absolutely poor to just poor or middle class. Let us quote China, which over the last decades has been able to catapult tens of millions of people into middle class. The same going for India, another country with an enormous population, also back in the 19th century being a country of paupers. Millions of people lived in absolute poverty and misery. Not anymore. The number of the absolute poor has gone down spectacularly. The same going for other countries as well. Just to say that humankind may righteously boast of a multitude of issues being tackled and aspects improving. Institutions that are international, agencies and organizations liaising with the UN, big organizations, charities, all this has been playing a role. Having said that, there are various other aspects that still need to improve. But after all, being able to provide for the upkeep of so many people is not a simple thing. If anything, we have been able, as humankind, to reduce the number of people who have no access to food. Yes, there are still many, but not as many as before, and that despite the number of people living on this planet today having been tripled and more. There is also the problem of how nature has been treated, and perhaps by managing sources and resources correctly, we might do even better. The contingent issue is about how to maintain such high rates of performance and yield, even if we have to resort to genetically modified products, the overconsumption of meat because of the tremendous development of livestock breeding. This is also an issue. Maybe we're exhausting our resources. Maybe we are providing for today without caring for tomorrow, and perhaps this will be leading to a major disaster. But there is no point in us heralding doomsdays ahead. Rather be realistic and sober in discussing the parameters. Mrs. Efthymiou, another question. You as an academician, as a person that delves into history, based on the special features of the times we're crossing, please tell me, what are the highlights of your references? What are the points you believe would help us discuss and therefore be of help in our effort to understand what could be those aspects that might be of help to us all to delve more thoroughly into and understand things? Well, this is a very general question. What I have been following closely and what makes me ponder about all those things that keep coming from various sources are two main things, namely the difficulty I believe democracy will have to maintain itself alive if we're talking about the administration of something truly universal. I have the feeling that the political model that has been prevalent since the 19th century, after all this Western-type democracy, is an Anglo-Saxon achievement of the last 200 years that has been expanding itself around the planet. In some countries, this may be functioning correctly, somewhere else maybe not as much, but all in all, there is some kind of tiredness, there is some kind of indifference and a feeling of debacle, if I may say so. Maybe we need to refresh the perceptions and approach some notions anew. Will we be successful in that? It remains to be seen. The fact remains that in many countries there are issues raised as to the way democracy has been functioning, even in countries where there was some kind of stability and a high degree of maturity, politically speaking. This makes one wonder as to where we're headed at. And as China is preparing to become the great leader of this planet, provided they may liaise with the US. Interestingly, I read in the press that last year China was second only to the US in new patents, and so inventions and inventiveness is definitely quite present in China. After all, for the last 3,000 years, they have been the most inventive people on this planet. Now, with Chinese universities getting ahead, and they go ahead by 10 positions every year, and the research centers are also gaining in aura, perhaps China can be expected to become the new pole of interest, together with the US and the UK. For the last 150 years, those two areas have produced the most important inventions we have been living with. So if China takes over, they have every possibility to become the leader. Perhaps China has nothing to do with Western time democracies. Consequently, I believe I have answered your point. I have given you my ideas as to what might happen, and this is one of the parameters of the future, a very important one. Absolutely. Absolutely. The only thing I mean to say that is precisely, as you were mentioning, China, there's another question coming to us. I can read this on the screen. The rise of China over the last decades, the message says, is to many in the West a very worrying phenomenon. Is it possible for a country that is based on a totalitarian regime to seriously challenge the welfare of democratically organized societies and definitely bring them under its leadership? How actual, how topical indeed. Well, we are, I believe, thinking the same way. Indeed. Well, the West is indeed worrying, and there are many people who are quite distressed. If anything, the Western civilization that imposed itself worldwide in a variety of ways, whether in a calm and cultural penetration or by other ways as well. One way or another, it happened. Wherever interventions happened, in that sense, a condition sine qua non was invoked, the effort to reinstate democracy. There was this condition, and that was what conditioned the investments and the efforts and whatever penetrations there may have been attempted. It was the official narrative that we cannot have this without democracy. Well, the Chinese, as we have come to realize, are expanding themselves spectacularly through their investments without ever raising any political or other agenda of ideological nature. All they need, and they want to have, our contracts, and they put no conditions as to political or ideological pursuits. If I may say so, the Chinese are entering the international arena without invoking any political ideologies. We all know who's having the upper hand in China. It is a communist party since 1949. Consequently, one might expect that as a communist country, they will be operating in a specific way, and there are also some doubts as to whether it is really this regime that rules China. If you're asking me, I believe that in many ways, China is quite close to what has been in the past, and that was the imperial regime. China, as the whole of Orient, in that sense, I believe much has been written about it. The whole Orient, from the Mediterranean on to the Pacific coast, has for thousands of years been accustomed to a centralized way of administration. They operate better when ruled by a central authority. So the imposition of Western-type democracy, for some reason, can never be completed, could be superficial, and so forth, therefore doomed to fail in Asia. The exception being India, which seems to be a more successful democracy of the kind in the area. India is a special case. This I say because China, if you're asking me, is headed towards something they have known for years, for thousands of years, to be administered centrally by a central authority, be it the Mandarins, in the old sense, in the new sense, the Communist Party mongers, people who may be quite successful and quite knowledgeable and quite intelligent, I grant you that much. People who have been able to bring China very much ahead on several occasions in the past, and this is happening once again. So you see, in Imperial China, this is what happened. What I have read is happening in China, namely that the central nucleus of the economy has been in the hands of the emperor, the public arena, the state. It was the state that produced porcelains and fine silkware, and the major silk manufacturers at the level of industries for so many thousands of years that produced these exquisite quality products that found their way to the West over the route of silk in caravans and so on, have been mostly produced and manufactured by publicly owned production units controlled by the emperor, so therefore the public sector. The same happened with the management of public assets. In modern time China, factories are controlled by the Communist Party, and so is the banking system. By that I mean that China has been mostly following what they have always known. It is a spirit that was around and the tradition that has been consolidated for thousands of years under the imperial rule. Recently I read into an article I was impressed by. I'd like to share this with you. China has made a name for having been already since 250 before Christ, the system that in order for one to be a high-ranking official in China, besides Mandarins, all others were selected on the basis of a national competition. It is a nationwide competition for the selection of staff that happened 250 years before Christ. Something unique, and this continued to happen for thousands of years, and that was combined with a constant evaluation of public officials and officers every year, year in, year out, and unless one met the criteria for performance, one would be sacked and would have to pay for the damages caused to the Chinese state by not performing the way one should be expected to perform. All this I share with you because you see, according to the Confucian perception, the state in China rated meritocracy quite high, and selecting the best based on clear-cut and transparent criteria. That was a national competition. Of course, things were not that rosy. There have always been some processes one could drive around procedures, but anyway, generally speaking, for one to become a member of the Chinese Communist Party is something very difficult and demanding in China. So one has to go through quite a number of challenges, and also individually and collectively, for one to become accepted as member of the Communist Party, and to even more so if one wants to undertake an office within the party. Yet another element, I believe, is coming from the past. And indeed, as you explained in the first part of your answer, this complements the whole outlook. So coming back to the West, I am reading into another question that has come. I heard Mrs. Efthymiou praising our times, but the quest for something new, which is the vaccine, should go hand in hand with confirmed success stories of the past. Quarantine is one. Nowadays, tested methods against the pandemic are relying on two conditions that modern capitalism finds it impossible to sustain: a worldwide quarantine that within 2 weeks would make the pandemic go, that with a fair distribution of vaccine so as to avoid two-pace worlds where some countries have access to vaccines and some not. Politically, is this possible? My answer is quite clear. Indeed, there are countries that have been lagging behind vaccination-wise, and as we're all reading, efforts are being waged. Whole continents have been left aside. Africa, the most blatant example, Mrs. Bousdoukou says, is the whole continent of Africa that has been left behind. Indeed, and that is what we have been following in the press and in the media, and that's what our dear friend who put through the question means. It is such a major failure for us to have left Africa behind. I do not know whether it would be envisageable to have a worldwide quarantine for 2 weeks. I do not know what this would suggest in real life, in a variety of aspects. Right now, without being a specialist, I believe this might be a disaster. But even so, we may not allow for the whole world to stop turning for 2 weeks. That's impossible. That's my personal feeling, based on the reflections of the friend who put through the questions. Having said that, I believe that quarantine is a well-tested method. It's been known, and it has been tested, and indeed, whenever it is implemented, it is yielding results, and so it did in our case. If anything, it somehow contained the tremendous expansion of the pandemic, but I'm not a specialist to tell you whether things are better now than they would be if there had been no quarantine. I'm just following what the specialists say. I have the feeling I'm doing the right thing. I have been vaccinated thrice. I may even have more vaccines if need be. And of course, I observed my confinement rules. Mr. Efthymiou, is there a mistake of the past you see is being repeated in this country? Another question. Well, it's not about mistakes, it's about mentalities we have harbored. Every people has its own mentalities and culture. We as well have our obsessions, and given our tendency towards polarization, which is associated with some triggering events already dating back in the early 19th century, past our independence, these culture and mentalities are very solidly embedded and difficult to change. I don't know whether I'm mistaken or not, but what I would suggest is that what definitely is haunting us, and it is truly internal, it's very intrinsic. We need to process it intrinsically and, be very frank and look ourselves in the mirror and say, no, I will stop harming this and that side. The facility whereby we are bound to undermine public assets, the facile way whereby we're dealing the rest of the society. I know, well, if I may, and I apologize for interrupting you, why this? Why are we traditionally so obsessed? Why are we traditionally given to this kind of behaviors? Well, because our ideological structure is such that sustains that the state is represented by politicians. Each politician is being perceived in a very specific way. That's our perception. We see in every politician someone who is avid and ambitious and obsessed by one's own advancement and ambition, and someone who gives not a dime for public good, someone who's there to usurp the public assets and benefit personally. This is a kind of perception we all accept as something quite given for the last 200 years, and that despite the fact there have been many honest politicians in this country, just as there have been many dishonest politicians in this country. We have it all, but we neither praise nor do we reinforce the honest politicians? We tend to generalize and undermine, denigrate, scorn, and discredit the entire group of politicians, taking the example of a few dishonest, incapable. We ask a lot. We demand the world. Were we the honest ones, then we should be courageous enough to discard these people and set up small groupuscules, as the case was some thousand years ago, when people lived in small communities that were ruled in a self-reliant way. If we still want to live in greater societies, we need something centralized, so there must be specific ways whereby to operate. We have adopted all that, but we're also undermining that. We can't afford to continue like this. This is schizophrenic. Either we content ourselves with small formations and xenobia, or we go down the path of greater communities. We won't be reinventing the wheel. Do not forget, the Greek society was the first to invent these principles, and the whole humanity are discussing reflections we put in place some 2,500 years ago. We don't have to dig a lot to find the answer. In following you, I perceive what you say. We need to further help develop within ourselves a notion of individual political responsibility, something we keep repeating today and which I believe is quite important. I'm speaking about the political dimension of a citizen that does not identify fully, albeit sometimes it is expressed through the partisanship, the political expression and nature of each member of the society. Absolutely. So when I use the term political, I always have in mind the term citizen. It is about being civic, not about being political in the partisanship sense. But the fundamental thing is how you are perceiving the society and the interactions we're in. You would like to repeat these. We're lagging behind in that, I'm afraid. We are harming ourselves. We're being suicidal in a way. I believe that we're now improving as of late for a variety of reasons. We don't have a time now, I believe, to develop and elaborate on. I believe the Greek society, as all, myself included, have been quite perplexed. We are looking for ways to become brighter, more optimistic. We don't want to be pessimistic. Those who scorn everything, downplay everything, see conspiracies in everything, as if someone evil is there behind to harm us. Nor would we like to remain a society that rejects anyone coming ahead. We can't have it. Without administration, we can't have society. There is no way you yourselves could ever be able to live without self-administering oneself. We are administering our own selves every day, every single moment. We are managing ourselves, so we need to allow for the institutions to manage our lives. We opt for them, we put them in place, and the society is ours. And this is also what I mean to say. You did say that mistakes happen. Yes, we assume our mistakes. We fully appropriate our mistakes, and we invoke property of our mistakes. This is what we are. We've got our good aspects and we've got our less than good aspects, weak points, strong points, but it's a time for us to frankly and candidly look ourselves in the mirror, because we need to assume our responsibility. Since you mentioned our second centennial anniversary since the Declaration of Independence of this country from the Ottoman rule, my question is, do you believe we have looked ourselves in the mirror? Let us have it from the people in the street. What is the symbolism of revolution? What is the modern notion and aspect of revolution? Is there a revolution today? Does it mean anything to us today?
Φέτος γιορτάζουμε 200 χρόνια από την Ελληνική Επανάσταση. Εσείς πού εντοπίζετε η ανθρωπότητα σήμερα να κάνει επαναστάσεις?
Όταν ακούμε επανάσταση, πάντα σκεφτόμαστε ότι βίαιο και το ένα το άλλο. Ό,τι μπορείς να το κάνεις ειρηνικά και να το επικοινωνήσεις με σωστό τρόπο στο άλλος να το καταλάβει, είναι καλό να γίνεται.
Πρέπει όλοι να κάνουμε από τη δική μας πλευρά αυτό που λέγεται η μικρή επανάσταση με το διάλογο, γιατί πάντα ο διάλογος φέρνει τα αποτελέσματα και ποτέ η επίθεση. Μας φτάνουν και κάποια στιγμή και στην επίθεση, εξαγριωνόμαστε για αυτά που γίνονται, αλλά νομίζω ότι μόνο με το διάλογο θα μπορέσουμε να βρούμε και να αφήσουμε την νεολαία να κάνει τα βήματα που πρέπει.
Ενώ πριν επαναστατόταν ο κόσμος με όπλα, με πόλεμο, από κάποιος εχθρό που το ήξερε, που ερχόταν πάνω του. Υπάρχει τώρα όλη αυτή η κατάσταση που όντως σαν να επαναστατωνόμαστε από ένα αόρατο εχθρό. Και μερικοί είναι από αυτή την πλευρά και μερικοί από την άλλη.
Απ' τη μία, οι επαναστάσεις είναι καλές, διότι άμα δεν υπάρξει μια επανάσταση και μια εξέργεση, δεν θα μπορέσει να γίνει τίποτα και να μην πάει τίποτα μπροστά. Αλλά πολλές φορές κάποιοι κερδοσκοπούν από τις επαναστάσεις και πολλές φορές κάποιοι βρίσκουν την επανάσταση ως δικαιολογία απλά για να βγάλουν το άνακτη τους.
Αυτή τη στιγμή πιστεύω ότι οι επαναστάσεις που γίνονται με λάθος στόχο. Οπότε δεν θα το έβαζα στα καλά, θα το έβαζα στα κακά. Αντί να βρούμε τον τρόπο να ξαναγυρίσουμε στην κανονικότητα όσο γίνεται, που αυτό δεν θα υπάρξει ποτέ, κάνουμε τα δύνατα δυνατά για το αντίθετο αποτέλεσμα.
Για να γίνει μια επανάσταση, αρχικά πρέπει να ρισκάρεις. Και δεύτερον, πρέπει να υπάρχει μια ένωση μαζική. Το να χωριστούμε σε μικρές ομάδες και ο ένας να κάνει μια μικρή επανάσταση εδώ, άλλος εκεί, το αποτέλεσμα είναι πολύ μικρό.
Αν θα ήμασταν πιο ενωμένοι, όπως είπα πριν, ίσως θα μπορούσε να γίνει και αυτό. Και θα ήταν ακόμα καλύτερο. Αλλά έτσι, διαχωρισμένοι, τσακωμένοι, μισημένοι, δεν σηκώνεται εύκολα πλέον ο κόσμος από τον καναπέ του. Δεν είναι όπως ήταν τότε.
Σήμερα η ανθρωπότητα δεν κάνει επαναστάσεις, όχι δυστυχώς. Αλλά ελπίζω αυτό στο μέλλον να αλλάξει, να επιστρέψει αυτό το πείσμα.
Όχι, πιστεύω ότι δεν υπάρχουν μικρές επαναστάσεις σήμερα. Πιστεύω ότι το πράγμα έχει γίνει τελείως ατομικό και ότι αν υπάρχουν μικρές επαναστάσεις θα πρέπει να υπάρχουν μέσα στον καθένα μας και εγώ δεν τις ξέρω.
Εγώ συνειδητοποίησα ότι κάνω επανάσταση στο γυμνάσιο για το ντύσιμό μου, για το πώς θα είναι το μαλλί μου, για το αν θα έχω σκουλαρίκι, αν θα έχω τατουάζ. Και ήταν η πρώτη μου επανάσταση σε στυλ. Και τι, λένε ότι δεν θα με πάρουν σε κάποια δουλειά άμα με δουν έτσι. Είναι ο κόσμος έτσι από τη μία, από την άλλη όμως θέλω και εγώ κάπως να εκφράζομαι, να δείχνω ποια είμαι.
Θεωρώ ότι οι επαναστάσεις γίνονται καθημερινά. Ουσιαστικά βιώνουμε και μια περίοδο τεχνολογικής επανάστασης, επανάσταση σε διάφορα θέματα. Οι γυναίκες πλέον διεκδικούν τα δικαιώματά τους, οι άνθρωποι, οι μειονότητες γενικότερα. Μπορεί να μην είναι μια επανάσταση με όπλα όπως έγινε πριν 200 χρόνια, παρ' όλα αυτά δεν πάβει να είναι και αυτή μια μορφή εξέγερσης, επανάστασης και διεκδίκησης δικαιωμάτων.
Σίγουρα βρισκόμαστε σε μια περίοδο μεγάλης αλλαγής. Θα έρθουν μεγάλες αλλαγές. Ακόμα και το κλίμα, ας πούμε, βλέπεις ότι θα πρέπει να γίνει μια πιο ριζοσπαστική προσέγγιση. Άρα θα πρέπει να υπάρξει και μια επανάσταση και εκεί.
Well, many answers, different ways of thinking, different directions. No, not at all, says Maria Efthymiou. I think that there was convergence. Many people believe that there is no revolution, other people believe that there is a revolution. I didn't hear you. Come again, says Anna Bousdoukou. Well, as a matter of fact, most people, in fact, gave stochastic answers. That is, they thought about what they were proposing. They were not proposing revolutions with blood. They wanted things to change, but as a result of thought. I think that the Greek society is going through a period of tacit change for the better, in my opinion, if things go on like this and if they don't collapse because of something else. all of us are concerned. All of us have been reflecting on things, and some of us have already managed to be better citizens. We've learned, or we're learning how to be better citizens. Regarding our history, the anniversary and the symbolism of the anniversary of our independence, did it actually comprise our self-reflection, looking at ourselves in the mirror, and the celebrations on the anniversary of our independence? What was it like for people? Look, I gave about 250 lectures on the matter because we have WebEx in this day and age, and on some days I gave 3 lectures every day. So technological revolution, yes, thanks to the technological revolution. I'm speaking, drawing on my experience because I know what happened to me. I'm certain that many of the colleagues who specialize in this particular period in history were also very active. Now that the year 2021 is reaching its end, I would say that the year was a success despite adversities, the adversities that we all know, of course. There were many events, festive events, that were, of course, not conventional in the sense that it was not easy for us to gather in one place and touch one another and be very near one another. This is what we lacked, but in fact, because of technology, many events had a far greater impact in the sense that many more people could take part remotely. And, of course, it goes without saying that there was a great volition and will to celebrate. And as far as I followed it, this was not just celebrating the independence. Many discussions were, in fact, to the point and quite comprehensive regarding our history within the framework of the global history, etc. I believe that we took steps and we understood not only better the 200 years that went by, but we have shown our class as a society. It was proven that universities, research centers, bodies, foundations were ready. For years, the University of Athens, in fact, had prepared an amazing program of actions. It had been prepared 3 years ago, and the programs have been very successful. I'm talking about the University of Athens because this is where I teach, and this is a university I'm familiar with. I'm absolutely certain that other universities and other research centers had wonderful publications. It's enough to see the exhibition of the Benakis Museum on Piraeus Street. There is no museum in Greece that didn't run a parallel exhibition on the occasion of our 200-year anniversary since the Independence War of 1821. This is quite indicative. There's been fervor. The question is not whether we took action and there were activities. There were activities, and in my opinion, it looked glorious. But answering your question about whether or not we have changed following reflection, I would say yes. 21 contributed to that, and I'm saying this for the 3rd time. As a society, we've been going through a phase of change, tacit, intrinsic, internal change. And what's internal is very important. This is what we lack because we're extroverted people, we're Mediterraneans, and we are quite effusive, and we enjoy that. But change necessitates a great reflection and internal conversation, and I think we've engaged in that. I'd like to profusely thank you, Mrs. Efthymiou. Personally speaking, and I don't habitually speak personally, I'd like to say that after our discussion, I can leave this meeting of ours feeling more optimistic, because I can't hide from you that apart from the global community and in the way that you described things to occur among the big powers, taking into account distinctive features of different continents, we have concurrently the past, the tradition in what you touched upon regarding discord and division in Greece, but there's also questioning the authorities and at the same time demand, and at the same time the lack of power on the part of citizens, and the fact that things boil down to personal responsibility. And I'm talking about my generation, because my generation has been through 15 years of recessions and crises that acted like communicating vessels. Disappointment leads to frustration or resignation, depending on how people want to express themselves. This is prominent. So this structured sense of optimism that you shared with us this evening and you explained is something that we definitely need. Suffice it to go back and to think of what has happened in the past. Suffice it to draw on the power from within. We can change as a whole, starting from the inside and going to the outside. This is a theory that I believe is true. And I'm closing with a personal comment, but I don't believe that it's only personal. That's why I'm using the time to express it. I think that we all need this change. Thank you very much again. The Dialogues and the Stavros Niarchos Foundation and the journalists that have been going through other adversities, and there we have other responsibilities on the part of journalists and the public, of course, first and foremost responsibilities of the journalists. We do need optimism and we do need action at the same time. And if I may be allowed, let me recall what you said in the past. We need to look back to the past more, to grow stronger and not lose our courage and nerve for the future, and retain this temperament that we have, but be modest in order to be focused and composed. Because you said this, in fact, you said that history makes us more humble, more modest. Yes, indeed, more humble, more modest, but stronger at the same time. Our society has very long threads. All societies have a past, but we have this great traditions of letters. Only two peoples in the world can track their history and have writings to go by for 3,500 years. It is only we, the Greeks and the Chinese. This is a privilege. We have a wealth behind us. We have a language that's been there forever and a beauty. All peoples have their own beauty, of course, but we have our beauty, and it is our strength. It is our vehicle, if I may call it so, for the best. We can do things. We were not born yesterday. We have a past. And if we sweetly and politely correct one another when we do silly things, we'll grow better. So we need dialogue first and foremost. Yes, of course. And trust. It's important to start with trust and to see it change. It's far better than start with mistrust and annihilate everything from the beginning. We do need trust. We have so many wonderful people around us who are infused with values, and they are people with great merit. Mrs. Efthymiou, thank you very much. I had prepared questions that would be nagging questions, but I shan't ask because you changed the climate. I wish you all greetings of the season, and may you have wonderful holidays. In January 2022, we'll meet again. Let's hope and let's wish for health, physical health and mental health. May we have very nice holidays. All the best.